All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring a pretty fascinating thought experiment from the English Leap podcast. We're going to look at what exactly happens when we suddenly strike it rich. And you know what? We're going to use this super imaginative scenario to pick up some incredibly practical, everyday English vocabulary. It's honestly just a brilliant way to supercharge your language skills while having a bit of fun along the way. Let's get into it.
I want you to picture this. It's tomorrow morning, you just woke up, you're still a bit sleepy, kind of rubbing your eyes, and you casually reach over to check your phone. Well, before we go any further, I want you to really focus your imagination on this exact moment. Think deeply about how you would personally answer this question. If you woke up a millionaire tomorrow, what would you actually do?
You tap open your banking app, and suddenly, boom, you see this exact number staring right back at you. You pass that little mental math test that podcast hosts Anna and Jake jokingly quiz each other on, counting the digits, and confirming that there are exactly 6 zeros sitting right there in your available balance, $1 million, literally ready to go.
So naturally, human psychology kicks in, right? The initial shock involves a very predictable sequence of events. First, you'd probably drop your phone in absolute sheer disbelief. Second, you'd frantically open and close the app just trying to refresh the screen. And third, well, you'd begin to deeply question reality. You'd desperately try to understand if it's a technical bug, if you're stuck in some crazy dream, or if you actually need to politely call the bank to see if they've made a colossal mistake. So the crucial point here is that in that initial moment of shock, you'd be trying to figure out what is happening. And this actually brings us to the very first phrase on our vocabulary tour today. To figure something out means you are actively searching for the truth, checking your app, thinking through all the possibilities, or getting ready to ask the bank some very, very important questions.
At first, seeing all that money on your screen would just feel too good to be true. Think about when your absolute favorite, super expensive food is randomly on sale for 90% off, or when a friend who is literally always late promises they are ready to leave right now. Your brain immediately throws up a red flag, right? Because it simply doesn't feel real.
But let's say the bank actually confirms it is real. This brilliantly illustrates the temporary feeling of being on top of the world. For a little while, life is just so amazing, and you feel so invincible that you start making hilarious promises. Just like Jake from the podcast, who immediately declared he would hire staff for his neglected houseplants. You just feel completely unstoppable.
Now, this sudden wealth creates a massive contrast in human behavior. Initially, you have that first crazy week of spending, which is just a purely emotional reaction. But eventually, the adrenaline fades, and your brain finally calms down enough to start making logical decisions.
In that very first chaotic week, you might splash out. And this means spending a huge amount of money on something entirely for fun, not because it's practical, and definitely not because it's cheap. For instance, Anna confessed she would splash out on a first-class ticket to Japan purely so she could buy every single snack in every shop she found, which honestly sounds pretty amazing.
Or, alternatively, you might blow money. This phrase describes spending your new wealth way too fast, and usually in a rather silly way. Jake actually admitted he'd probably blow money on a ridiculously loud sports car. The exact kind of purchase that screams to the entire world that you have absolutely no idea how to be smart with your newfound wealth.
What's truly fascinating here is the timeline of this behavior. It beautifully highlights just how quickly we transition from our wild, initial impulses to our long-term survival instincts. On day 1, we are perfectly fine being rich and a little stupid, buying silly cars and international snacks. But by day 7, almost like magic, we suddenly start acting completely responsibly.
By the end of that first week, you'd probably start to play it safe. Instead of seeking out more crazy thrills, you'd choose the careful option, actively avoiding big financial risks. You'd likely take the remaining bulk of that massive fortune and lock it away into a remarkably boring, but highly secure, bank account.
Alongside protecting your money, you'd also likely stick with it when it comes to the routines and hobbies you truly love. To stick with it means you don't quit, even when your entire life circumstances change. Just like Anna and Jake, who firmly agreed they would stick with making their cozy English podcast, simply because $1 million wouldn't change their deep passion for teaching.
Eventually, the novelty of the money wears off completely, and you'd move into what we can call the kind phase. You start choosing to do quieter, less dramatic things. You're no longer thinking about fancy vacations. Instead, you're thinking about paying off a family member's loan, covering stressful medical bills, or, as Jake joked, becoming the secret pizza millionaire and quietly paying 3 of your friends' rent without ever even telling them.
So why do we do these things? Well, because quietly paying off those loans and bills for the people you love buys them, and you, peace of mind. It's that incredibly powerful feeling when you can finally stop worrying, when the stress just evaporates, and your brain can genuinely rest. This is arguably one of the greatest things that wealth can actually offer anyone.
But that brings us to a much deeper and honestly far more important question. Would a massive influx of cash automatically change your inner voice? Like, can external wealth actually fix our internal psychological struggles, or does it just change the scenery around them?
Sure, you could definitely live it up for a few months. You could throw massive parties, take endless luxury trips, and eat at the most expensive restaurants in the world. But both podcast hosts agreed that eventually you would get tired of the constant excitement. Eventually, you would crave a simple day, a quiet walk, and just a really, really good cup of coffee.
Because here is the painful truth. Money doesn't rewrite your mental habits. If you are someone who tends to beat yourself up, meaning you talk to yourself in a very negative way, or you're just overly hard on yourself over small mistakes, you will still do exactly that, even if you're sitting in a giant mansion with a fancy car parked out front. We eventually start to see the real value of wealth. The ultimate goal isn't the loud, flashy, external stuff. The private islands, the fleets of cars, the endless fancy hotels. No, the true value is using the money to facilitate quiet, internal changes, less stress, mental space to create, and the free time to do things like, say, improve your English. And that perfectly explains why, ultimately, the smartest thing you can do with wealth is to buy back time. This means using your money to outsource tasks so you have more free time and less daily stress. You buy back your time so you can create the space to actually relax, to learn new skills, or to heavily invest in those daily English habits you've always wanted to perfect. Buying back your time and focusing on internal growth allows you to remain grounded. When you're grounded, you are simple, real, and humble. Your feet stay firmly on the earth. You don't let the money turn you into someone you're not. You might have $1 million in the bank, sure, but you're still sitting in comfortable clothes, chatting with your friends, and enjoying the simple things in life.
Okay, let's take a quick breath and review the massive amount of vocabulary we just covered. We've unpacked 12 incredibly useful, dynamic phrases today, from figuring things out to staying grounded. And the best part? You don't actually need $1 million to use them. You can start integrating these exact phrases into your daily English conversations right now, regardless of what your bank balance looks like.
So, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought, and I'd absolutely love for you to formulate your answer entirely in English. Think carefully. If you really woke up as a millionaire tomorrow morning, what is just one small, everyday thing you would change about your life? It doesn't have to be a private island. Maybe it's just buying better coffee or taking Fridays off. So, what's your one small thing? Keep practicing, stay grounded, and thanks for joining me on this explainer.